Testing. What's up? I'm Jacob Litzo, your Elixir mentor, and welcome to another exciting episode of the Elixir Mentor podcast. This is where we discuss everything related to Elixir, from interviews with enthusiasts, pioneers in the community, to innovative projects and libraries shaping Elixir's future. Today, I'm excited to have Levi Robertson, CEO and founder of 00. Levi built a self-hosted email monitoring service integrating with Amazon SES. Levi, thank you so much for being here and welcome to the show. If there's just a quick introduction you want to do to introduce yourself, that would be amazing.
Yeah. Thanks for having me. I feel like CEO is a big title. I'm just a guy making a product for now. Maybe if I hire people, I'll feel more comfortable saying that. But yeah, you gave a good summary of the product. It's like a resend, SendGrid, postmark alternative that you self-host. Similar to I explained it by saying I'm doing for resend what Coolify is doing to Vercel. I've been programming for about 10 years, but all of the Elixir stuff is very recent.
Nice. So 10 years, where did you start? What did you come from, like Node, or what were you building?
Yeah, essentially. I've done basically React for my entire career. Very early on, so I started in QA. That was the first tech job I got. And I did some test automation for a little bit. And who I was working for, it was U-Haul. And they had a ton of tests they needed. So I ended up building a whole dashboard for viewing and running those with React, and basically did that ever since.
Okay, that's cool. Now, since you are I'm assuming 00 is also Phoenix Live View, right? You're not.
It is, yeah.
Okay, cool. Do you ever want to go back, or are you completely absorbed and obsessed in the Elixir ecosystem now?
I do not want to go back. I would maybe be open to combining React in a Phoenix app if need be. We'll talk soon about how I'm using Vue in a Phoenix app. But honestly, I think React's making some missteps for the types of apps I want to build, and has been for a while. So I feel kind of like that community is leaving me behind, and I'm kind of fine with that. I feel like, especially lately, a lot of changes are very geared towards e-commerce. And I've been saying, if I wanted to do e-commerce, I would have focused on that forever ago. So,
yeah, I get that. I can't compare. I've only my first experience where I've made production level front end apps. Well, I did iOS, so I made whatever you call them, iPhone apps.
yeah.
And then I got fully ingrained into APIs and backend engineering. And I just never wanted to touch front-end web frameworks because I hate it. It sucks.
Yeah.
But I started doing it with my YouTube channel for live view, and it's enjoyable, but I can't relate to React. I know developers I've worked with and their complaints with a lot of the front-end frameworks, but I can't really compare.
It's crazy. And using live view has been such a breath of fresh air, honestly. It's so easy to do tasks that would be so complicated. Simple stuff like type ahead search boxes and stuff like that gets so messy so quickly in the front end ecosystem, especially as my career started by building single page apps. And I really feel like that's where these frameworks shined for a while. And then they all seem to move away from that. And I don't think they're well suited for the things they're currently trying to do.
Yeah, I feel like that's just the story of JavaScript in a nutshell, though, right? It's doing way more than it was supposed to do.
For sure. Yeah.
So what made you even discover Elixir? What brought it on your radar?
Good question. So the very first programming language I learned was Ruby, and this was in late 2014. And Elixir was either announced that year or sometime around then. So I gave it a shot back then, and just couldn't, especially being new to the industry, I saw no path to find a job as a Elixir developer back then. And that's when I started learning JavaScript, and that worked out well for me. So I kind of just put it down. And it wasn't until this product, I built a JavaScript version of it first with Hano, if you're familiar with that, and just React. And essentially, because my product is self-hosted, I wanted to make hosting it as easy as possible. And the JavaScript version had like a Redis container, a Postgres instance running, the container for the app itself. Then you needed the AWS configuration. And when it was in the open source library stage, like I didn't have the pro version yet, I had a couple users, and well, they wanted to be users, but they couldn't set it up. Basically, I was hosting it on Fly, and that made it pretty easy, but everyone else was using other hosts, and it was a pretty insane setup process. So it became clear that I needed to try and get it to as simple as possible. And mentioning Fly, they actually have a blog post about how anything can be done in Elixir. You don't need a separate queue running and stuff like that. So I was wondering if I could get it all into one Docker container, and that was basically my goal. And I thought, if that's the goal, there's like not a lot of other good options. So I'm gonna re-explore Elixir and Phoenix. And it was awesome. Like I had to relearn it all, and in about 2 weeks, I had rebuilt all the features that I originally had in the JavaScript version, and it was easy enough for people to actually host this time. So that was huge.
That's awesome. So you went from needing multiple Docker containers to just a single Phoenix app. That's nice. Yeah, I feel like that is a huge benefit to using Phoenix for sure.
Yeah, I think it's crazy how cool that is. And I think it gives me an edge on the competition, because some other people are trying to build similar stuff right now, and all of them have that same issue that I ran into originally. And I think if people are investigating buying software that they host themselves, and then they pull open the how-to guide and it's like 8 pages long, they're just like, I'll pass, man.
Okay, so I haven't looked. How long is your like getting started guide if I wanted to deploy 00?
I have like a brief guide that doesn't really go in depth, and that's just like 5 steps. You run SST. If you're familiar with that, it's like a way to automatically configure AWS.
Okay. I'm not very familiar with the AWS ecosystem.
Okay. So yeah, typically people go into the dashboard and like manually configure their queues and stuff. And then there's a couple infrastructure as code libraries that'll help you like codify that. And SST is, I think, one of the better ones, if not the best. And it's just TypeScript, which I obviously already knew. So that was easy to write. And so anyway, you just run SST. You don't even have to really worry about much there. Just run a command. And then from there, it's make a environment variable file and run your Docker container.
Nice. And then it's up. So you can run it on your own Droplet on DigitalOcean. FlyIO is probably even easier.
Yeah.
Gig Elixir, all that stuff. And you don't have issues with cross hosting platforms, really?
No, it's been pretty good. Weirdly enough, the hardest thing is when people want to host the whole thing on AWS, which has been interesting. I think it's funny.
I've worked for a handful of companies that were fully consumed by AWS and microservices. And I think it gave me a bit of like
PTSD.
Yeah, PTSD or some weird phobia. I won't touch the stuff. I refuse. I was like, no, I just want a simple Ubuntu server and I just want to run my own shit.
Yeah, I relate to that a lot. I basically only started touching it because SES is really good, I think, for sending emails.
Can you what got you in that space? What made you so interested in like an email service essentially?
It's a good question because yeah, it's kind of a weird thing to decide to obsess over, especially because I was a front end developer for so long. So it's not like I have this deep like email infrastructure background. Um, Essentially, I was making this other app that was for just simple form submissions. If you're familiar with Reform or Quest forms, it was kind of an idea to bridge those two. Quest forms is this like they just give you a form endpoint to submit to, so you can make a normal HTML form that posts to their backend, but they don't have a form builder. And then Reform is a form builder, and they don't have the other part. Um, and I had been freelancing for a long time, and almost any client always needs forms, whether it's a
Mm-hmm.
startup or a normal page or whatever. And often I would have to bring in both of those because they'd want some custom form, and sometimes they'd do surveys and they want the marketing team to just make those. So I was trying to like scratch my own itch there and just make something I could put my clients on. And when I made that, the first request a client had was to get emails when their form gets a submission. Pretty standard, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
And I started looking into the services that would allow that. And all of them just have so many weird issues, like whether it's downtime or data leaks or just crazy pricing. A lot of these are like contact based pricing. So you can have like 10 contacts for free, and then
Mm-hmm.
they're like however much a month per contact after, which is insane because that's just like a row in a database. There's no like resources being used there. Um,
You're not supposed to know
so at
that.
first, yeah, yeah, for sure. So at first I was like, yeah, maybe I'll make uh, an email SaaS competitor that's a little more fairly priced. And the more I thought about that, the more I was like, I'm just going to be incentivized to do the same stuff down the road,
Right.
which is where the whole like self-hosting pay once idea came from. Because I feel like that's a totally different incentive structure, uh, which encourages me to do other things like focus on making it a single Docker container instead of
How do you see that like working in the future? Like, because I feel like your price isn't that high, right? It's not
for
anything
sure.
crazy. So you buy it. Are you going to have major version releases like upgrade costs, or what's your plan for monetizing in the future?
Yeah, I haven't talked about that too much. This is probably the first time I'm going to say this out loud, but I do plan on doing like a rolling license. Everyone who's bought in pre-sale will just get a lifetime license. Theirs will be different, mostly to support the people that have supported me early on.
Mm-hmm.
But everyone else will probably get a 1 to 2 year license when it hits full release, and major version updates will be something you pay again for. I don't know if that it'll probably be like cheaper to renew than buying fresh, since that obviously makes sense. But the real concern I have around that is I think like email software is pretty simple and unambitious. I think, which is another reason I like kind of go after these SaaS companies that are raising like $300 million to build an email client. I'm like,
Right.
how many features can you really add to that long term? So I do think at some point the software will be more or less finished, and it'll just be bug fixes that come in the future. And then my monetization plan from there is like twofold. I think that there's a lot of like every app needs to send emails, right? Whether it's a WordPress website
Mm-hmm.
or a full blown SaaS. So I think if I can become so easy to set up that anyone can do it, there's a very wide net you can kind of throw.
Yeah.
And just some simple like math, if I sell 10,000 copies, which is a lot and ambitious but not crazy, like most SaaS companies need that many customers to survive anyway, uh that'd be like $2.5 million, and I could chill off that for a good while. I'm a pretty simple guy. I don't need like a yacht.
Mm-hmm.
um I also have some plans for other services that I'm kind of keeping under wraps that are like add-ons. that would be like a paid add-on for. I'll go ahead and say it. Actually, I've kept this secret for a while, but a plan I have is to pair it with like a Astro site. Are you familiar with Astro?
Mm-mm.
It's another JavaScript framework, one of the millions.
Oh,
But
yeah,
it's
yeah. Okay.
okay. So I think an Astro site that basically it connects to your 00 instance and it turns it into essentially a Substack competitor where you can have like a paid blog that's paired with an email list.
Nice.
So
That's smart. I love that.
thanks. Yeah.
Oh, I just got DM'd. I say I love that too much. They said my content would be amazing if I didn't say that phrase too often.
That's funny. What an odd complaint.
So now I have to find a new phrase. That's super neat.
Yeah, super neat that's a good one. I say that's awesome way too much.
Yeah.
So,
Well, what's funny is you don't realize the things you say all the time until you like rewatch what you're saying.
yeah,
Like when I started
sure.
editing my content, or like I'd never rewatch my live streams because I can't. But yeah, when I edit my stuff, you're like, dude, I can't believe I say that word so much.
That's funny.
And then you concentrate on it. You stop saying that word, but you replace it with another filler word, and
Yeah,
it's
probably
just
goofier too.
yeah, it's like a dirty cycle.
That's awesome. Now I'm going to catch myself every time I say that. But yeah, so yeah, long term, my business plan is just like keep offering new stuff, which is the same. It's so funny. People act like it's going to be so fundamentally different from a SaaS, and I'm like,
Oh no,
only
I was
in
gonna say I agree with your model. I was just curious
awesome.
on your plans. Well, one company that has sucked me in recently because I have a like a software agency, right? But most of our bread and butter, unfortunately, is just building websites.
Okay,
But so I obsessed and I built like a hosting platform with Phoenix. And so
nice.
now I can like host sites, like, tons of them for like relatively affordable amounts because I'm just hosting my one app essentially.
That's
And I
huge.
started
And
obsessing over,
you probably make recurring income off your clients.
yeah, so I make
Yeah,
recurring income off the hosting, which is amazing, right?
yeah, beautiful.
And so I started obsessing over SEO. And like things like right out of the box with my stuff is, the technical SEO and on-page SEO. I just blow it out of the water. And then I started researching. I was like, all right, what is this whole? I always kind of thought it was like a gimmick, like the keyword rankings and all that
Right.
junk. And I started checking out SEMrush, and I
Okay.
started like going through their features. They're SaaS though, they're monthly recurring stuff. But the way they have so many tools bundled in their platform, like they'll start you off at a tier where you get so much, and then you start discovering all these other tools that are just add-ons. And like before you
Yeah,
realize it, you're shelling out $500 a month to this company, but their tools are
yeah,
amazing.
for sure.
So I like where you're coming from though, where you just keep adding value and you're not necessarily locking people into $1,000 a month recurring bill.
Yeah, absolutely. Because I have no real ambitions to like take over the world. I don't want to like hire 100 people for this company or anything like that. So I think as a solo developer, you can deliver quality content or not content, but like features for a fair price and support
Hmm.
yourself. And I think a lot of us have lost sight of that. I don't know if it's like that we're so prone to chase being a unicorn and we want to be $1 billion business or something like that. But essentially, like part of my reason for building this, when I have this has to do with you doing your own hosting, which I think is awesome. I think we've lost that in the JavaScript community. We've kind of given these huge platforms all of our clients, and
Hmm.
they have no incentive back to us. Like I always bring up Shopify. Shopify, if you are a developer partner and you put people on the platform, you get 20% forever. which is incredible.
Mhm.
And in the JavaScript community, we have nothing like that. And I think the money was so good during the ZERP era that everyone was just fine with that. They were like, I get mine through having too many clients to pick all the time. But now that that's dried up, I know I am, and I think a lot of other people are looking around and they're like, why the fuck didn't I build some recurring income that I could still be living off of? And so that's another, sorry, I'm kind of talking in circles, but I built Double Zero with the intention to add a Teams feature soon so that someone like you could put your clients on your instance of Double Zero and also make recurring income off of charging them for email. And all the email SaaS is charged so crazy that you can offer them a great deal that they'd be happy for, and it would still make you money. So
Now I'm going over to your website and pre-buying right now.
awesome. That's the goal, right? But
Yeah.
yeah, I just think it's crazy. We've gotten in such a weird space in the industry where between giving all that away and then having sky high ambitions for anything we build, it's like there's this whole middle layer that can be served, and just nobody is. And I think that's another reason that WordPress is at like 70% of the web or whatever, however you
Oh
measure.
yeah, it's insane how high it is.
Yeah, and it's because they go after that market that nobody's serving. Like people don't want to pay $500 a month for random ingress costs or whatever. Like just give me something I can host and give me a box to put it on. And nobody's after that market. It's so weird.
Yeah, it is weird. Well, what's nice is like the majority of what I'm building is essentially just single page apps. And so we have a handful of templates, and we like I have a task that will just code generate, and I can pass in their like color palette, their branding, all of that. I can even steal their copy off their current website and be like, this is what your website could
Nice.
look like. And it could be, mobile optimized and more performant. And then I can run through, all the like the lighthouse scans and things with their current website and ours. And it's amazing how much more performance you get out of a live view app.
That's interesting. I haven't really looked into that. Because my obsession with Phoenix was all around like getting it to a single container. So it's funny, people keep asking me all these questions like how my Tailwind is bundled, is it code split and stuff, and I'm like, I don't even know or care.
Yeah, so that's like
funny.
one thing I have to figure out now. So I have, all this, I have my own like Tailwind config for every domain. And so you have a CSS and JS file, and I'm compiling them, and I like minify them. But like my last bit, I had to figure out how to get them compressed without breaking things. And I've been working on that this week. And I don't know, it's not as straightforward as I thought it could be, but maybe I just don't know what I'm doing, which is both are very possible.
It might be easier. Do you still use, I think ES Build is the default?
Yeah, I'm still using ES Build. And so, and maybe it's just like a false flag on the software, the platforms that I'm using to scan my site. But like everything's minified, and it just like, you need to compress them though. And then I don't know. So you get a weird, I get a slight performance knock because of that. And like, I've gone straight up OCD over these performance numbers. I was like, I want all my sites out of the box to be like 99% performant.
What are you at now?
So like Elixir Mentor, I haven't really spent that much time on. That one's sitting at like 93%. And then my HGA, my software agency, is 96%. And then a plumbing company we just launched is like at 98%.
That's great.
Yeah.
I wouldn't obsess over 99s, but yeah.
I got a problem, I think. Like I found my little tism.
That's funny. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, so when I added Live View, the View library, he needs to rename that, but it's can't be a homonym or whatever those are called.
Yeah.
Um, uh, he has you switch to Vite, which was pretty easy. And before I switched to Phoenix, I'd been using Vite for all my projects for a while.
Okay.
You might want to look into that. It might give you more options, but it'll certainly be easier. Vite is very easy to use.
Okay. I'll check it out. Nice. Um, so when you built your platform in JavaScript and then you moved, what were some of the like, I guess, what like the biggest technical challenges when you were shifting over to Elixir?
It was just learning the language itself, I guess, would be the biggest one, because so much stuff that was so hard to figure out how I was going to do in the JavaScript version was just, there was like one clear answer for in Elixir, at least for me. Like when I was looking into queues for JavaScript, some people use Redis, some people use Bull MQ, some people use, there's like 20 options. None of them are that good. Half of them aren't supported anymore. And then you come to Phoenix and Elixir and it's like everyone uses Oban. Cool. And it's good. Awesome.
Yeah.
And the docs are great. Like, and that's, I'm at the point in my career where even learning on a new language is pretty easy. So it was mostly smooth sailing. Everything that was weird or hard was just unfamiliarity at first, and then
How was
once
the
it clicked,
shift from mutable to immutable for you, or like the functional paradigm?
Yeah. So the React community embraced that a long time ago. We used to even use immutable JS was a huge library when I first started, which just like freezes every object or array or whatever. And eventually that kind of fell out of favor, the library, but not the paradigms. People kind of
Didn't the library have like really bad performance issues and like memory leaks and things?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And that, because of that, people kind of just, in the React community kind of alone, just adopted this like never mutate anything mentality. Like it can be mutated, just don't.
Okay.
Which has its own issues, because then you bring a junior on your team and they're doing all sorts of weird stuff and you have to like just pound it into their head that they're not allowed to do that.
That's what juniors are for.
For sure. But so yeah, long story short there, very used to that programming paradigm already. So that was easy for the most part.
Okay.
The weirdest thing was like having no state at all, and having to use like gen servers for that and stuff. That was and I'm still not really super familiar with that. I'm probably putting stuff in global configs that should be handled better.
Oh no. Yeah, I always say if you're just starting Elixir, stay away from gen servers and processes because you're going to use them wrong.
Interesting. Yeah.
Because that's the problem. Everyone thinks you need to hold state somehow, right? So that's what they end up using processes for.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. There's really only one piece of state that's kind of hokey in my app, and I definitely don't think I'm doing it right. But essentially, like your AWS account has rate limits for how much you can send, and I need to like fetch that when the app starts and then hold that and then check against it, But even that, I mean, I figured out a way to do it. I don't know if it's correct, but it's working great.
I'm sure it's fine.
Like
I'm sure it's
idiomatically correct. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, things that I use gen servers for like a lot of scheduling things, right? So I don't like my RSS feed and things and Discord events I have posted on my Elixir Mentor website. And I'll just make a gen server that, because you don't want to hit an endpoint every time someone visits that page. So I'll hold this state in a gen server so that gets loaded versus, hitting a third party every time someone requests data.
Nice.
Yeah. And then I think, yeah, you can just kind of control your outbound a little more then. And then you're just hitting it
Yeah,
once and sharing it across, thousands of users.
makes sense. I think I got fortunate in the type of app I picked because 00 is essentially just this like middle layer that's passing
Hmm.
things to AWS and then getting responses. So there's very little state in the whole app at all, which is great. I think I lucked out there because yeah, that probably would have been a trickier thing if I was like doing long running jobs or anything like that. But who knows? I as I was saying earlier, once you're trying to figure stuff out, there's like an Elixir way of doing things, which is what I loved about the Ruby community when I was in it. Um, and coming from JavaScript land where there's 40 ways to do any given thing and everyone wants to argue about why you're totally wrong about whatever you picked, it's very nice.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't miss that. I, I mean, I feel like I probably do things wrong all the time, but people are a little nicer in the Elixir community. Like, you don't
Yeah,
just get shredded. You might be like, you might want to do it this way. And then you're like, oh, that's a fantastic idea. Which is why I always tell people to read other people's libraries and code. Like, you have an open source version of 00. People should check it out and browse through it, and they'll probably learn a ton.
yeah, or have a lot of corrections for me. But
But then that just helps
like you
you.
said, at least they'll be nice. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I love that. Please do.
Um, I want to talk about your Markdown editor because it looks really nice. It
Okay.
looks smooth because I was just on your landing page and you have your like demo page, and I got
Mhm.
distracted by it. And I'm just very curious what you built it with and how you did that.
Yeah, so there's this Vue library, Vue.js, to clarify for everyone, uh, called GutenTap, and it's built on top of TipTap.
Okay.
TipTap is this very simple, like bare bones text editor that's very extendable. And I've used it before, and I built something. TipTap has a Svelte library, a Vue library, and a React library, which is great. And I made a similar editor with Svelte. Um, and I didn't really want to do that all again because it is a lot of work. Um, so when I picked Vue for this project, I was like, I have to find someone that already built something on top of TipTap because I don't want to do it from scratch again. And this one's awesome. It's not like a one for one exactly what I need. So I had to fork the project. You can like npm install it, but that wasn't going to work for me. So it's just like a forked and modified version of that.
Okay. And then as far as your preview goes, are you just using like Highlight JS or what are you using there?
Like when you switch to preview the email.
Yeah, when you're previewing the HTML or the Markdown, I guess, like because you have code snippets and things, and
Yeah. So it actually uses this library called Vue Email, which is a Vue fork of React Email.
oh, okay,
And it takes the TipTap gives you JSON basically that describes the structure of everything, and it just maps through that and converts everything to a matching Vue email component, and then it displays that in something called Letter, I think, which is a basically a way to emulate the HTML environment an email will have.
okay, nice. That's awesome. Like, because it just looks so good. I was like, I want my blog posts to look like that.
Yeah, I plan on because I had to make so many changes to GutenTap. I plan on making that its own library and putting that out there. So that might be useful to you at some point, especially if I sell you on live view.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I'll
but
have to check it.
it's
I'll
awesome.
have to, I'll have to check it out. I haven't really found a need for me to like leave live view in the live view. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah,
Live view VUE needs to change their name. It's not
yeah,
right.
yeah. Way too confusing.
Yeah.
Very. online mentality to like think it's always going to be written and people aren't going to be talking about it like this.
Right. And then, yeah, we're talking about live view and no one knows.
Yeah. Yeah. You just try to hit the emphasis right.
What can we change it to? View?
Uh, sometimes I call
Live
it
view
live view
JS.
JS. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that's better.
Yeah, that is a little better. Yeah.
But
All
it
right,
sucks because especially if you were making that, you're like, that's the perfect name because live svelte already existed too. So it's
yeah.
like, of course I'll call it live view. And then, yeah, you don't think that
Yeah.
like
Well,
every
and now,
podcast
yeah,
or
because
talk.
everything, and then it's like live native, and we have all these.
Right.
Yeah,
Right.
it makes sense. Like I get it. Just like all the Elixir libraries are always like EX at the end,
Yeah.
or some play on EX. But yeah, it didn't work. How did Elixir benefit you at all with like the concurrency model? And I feel like it has, because you talk about you're using Oban and stuff, right? So
Yeah.
that's helping you. And you
Yeah.
got rid of Redis. Because I remember when I first started building, I didn't know anything. Like I didn't touch a process for like a year coding in Elixir, and I was just like trying to force things to be very object oriented style. Like it wasn't good. I fixed a lot of code after my first year of coding, but so I was like using Redis as like a rate limiter and things like that. And then you actually find out you could use like an ets table or some long process, like a gen server or anything other than what I was doing. And like, I don't think people realize how complicated kind of your DevOps becomes the more stuff you have to crank up in a container. Like Redis has to be running on its own, and then it's another database you have to worry about security. So like keeping everything in one place and just with one Postgres database is really nice.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I actually switched to a SQLite database when I switched to
Okay, nice.
yeah,
I've
which is the
always
reason it got all the way down to one container.
Yeah, that's awesome. So then you're like, it's essentially JSON, right? Or it is
Yeah.
JSON. Yeah. Do you see any limitations with that? And
No, so I was worried that because it has one writer, like there's not concurrent writes to SQLite. And pretty early on, some of my customers were like, I'm going to send millions of emails at a time. So how quickly can you send a shit ton of emails? Sorry, I don't know if you swear on here.
I mean, it happens.
All right, sorry. So yeah, I did some tests and I got up to, I was sending like 11,000 emails per second and recording them. So I don't think I don't know anyone's AWS account that lets you send that much. So that's more or less what I'm going off of. And I don't think I'll hit any issues anytime soon.
Yeah, that seems pretty good. 11,000. You said a second?
Yeah.
Nice. And then are you just batching, or how do you do that?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah, it's like at first it was a very crude implementation. And this kind of answers your other question too about concurrency. Because I had the single write issue, I don't really like spawn tasks or anything like that. But what I do, because I believe just by the nature of Phoenix, it's spawning a separate like subthread or whatever for each request, right? Maybe I'm misled.
Well,
about that, but that's how
every user that connects is at least getting their own instance.
So basically, at first I just did a very crude implementation that got the request, made the email, sent it off, put it in the database, gave you the result back. But now I create a record ID for the email and then give you that back in the response immediately. So that's the whole exchange there. And then everything else is just put into a queue. The queue's batched up. So it tries to batch them in sets of like 1,000 or something. And then it's got like a timeout, obviously. That's how Oban handles that stuff. So yeah, it just from there, it sends the email off and writes to the database in big batches.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I'm impressed by the 11,000. Honestly, I think that's good. I don't have that much experience with SQLite or any of those, but I feel like they're definitely the way to go for like simple database integrations.
For sure, yeah.
Somewhat.
Yeah, because I think a lot of my customers are going to be smaller companies or indies. And like I said, I've had a couple customers that are asking about sending millions of emails, and I plan on adding a Postgres option later, maybe for them. But I've been like, people ask all the time, and I'm like, unless you're sending more than 11,000 emails a second, you're totally good on the current stack.
Mm-hmm.
And everyone's not sending anywhere near that much. It's like
My email
huge
list is
amounts.
pretty pathetic. I
Yeah,
got
mine
work to
too,
do.
which is so funny, running an email
Yeah.
startup, and I've got a list of like a couple hundred people.
Do you ever think you'll offer like a version you host for people
Yeah,
as like a
actually,
revenue stream?
I've been talking about that a little bit recently. Are you familiar with Coolify? I think I brought them up earlier.
I'm not familiar with them, but I've heard you talk about them.
Okay, so it's like a dashboard to deploy apps, probably similar to the thing you built yourself. And he has an option. The whole thing's free and open source, which is very cool. He doesn't even have like a paid tier. And if you host it yourself, you're probably going to pay at least $5 a month to Hetzner. And he makes money off of a hosted option that's $5 a month, and he'll just put you on a couple machines he owns.
Okay.
So I want a model similar to that, because I'm very anti-SaaS nowadays. So I don't really want to incentivize myself to try and charge people per customer or contact or something like all these other ones do. So I'll likely have it where you can buy the pro version and have like a really cheap hosting option through me, which I think is cool, because essentially, like, people are gonna pay for a host anyway. I have a lot of people, whenever I say that, they're like, so a SaaS, and I'm like, that's like, do you call digital, like, I don't know, like, are all your hosts a SaaS?
Yeah, I don't
I
know.
guess
I
to
feel
some
like
extent, but
a little bit, but at least you can do anything. Like my DigitalOcean droplets, I can do whatever I want on them, you know?
right, yeah,
I
it's not
feel
like
like
I can
SaaS
just
is a specific product,
right,
which,
yeah,
I don't know. It is, but
I
it's a cleaner
agree,
version. It's like the way I really love how plausible operates too, right? You can self-host their analytics, their open source. I mean, you don't get all their features, but then their like paid version where they host it, it's it's either the same price or cheaper of what it would cost you to host
yeah,
anyways. So I
yeah.
think that's a pretty awesome option.
I totally agree. I think there's a lot of like integrity in that model. It's like everybody wins when
Hmm.
you can just rely on a company to do a much better job than you would do on your own for the price that you would pay on your own anyway.
Yeah, exactly. And then you get to support companies that you
Right.
like and products that you like without breaking the
Exactly.
bank.
Yeah,
Well, and like DevOps is hard. Like I
for
hack
sure.
my way through it and I do my own DevOps, but I would never want to teach someone how to do DevOps.
Yeah.
Like no, then you guys will know all my
Yeah.
security vulnerabilities.
That's funny.
But yeah, it's
Yeah.
hard. But I like that model a lot. I think that's cool.
Thanks. Yeah. I definitely want to make sure that all of my incentives kind of align with my own ideals. So people have asked me directly, especially because when I add teams to the software, there's no reason I can't just host that and then it be a SaaS that I charge people for. So people are like, why wouldn't you do that? And I'm like, because then, a year from now, I'm like, oh, I could make more money if I,
You know what I should
did
charge?
whatever.
$20 per
Yeah.
seat. I hate when
Yeah.
companies do that.
Right.
All right, I get charging per seat after you get a certain number of users. But like right out of the gate, when SaaS companies are like $20 a month and then it's 20 per user, I'm like, well, now we're just going to use one password and share our single user because
Right.
that's mental. It's like I'm a
Yeah.
huge fan of Canva, and you used to
Okay.
get 5 seats out of the box with them. Like super great
Yeah.
product, and now they're charging per seat per month.
That sucks.
I
Yeah.
know.
Same with Vercel. They charge per seat, and I've subcontracted for a lot of agencies and stuff, and they always have some custom weird GitHub like actions workaround to like, because the way Vercel does it is crazy. They can tell who made the commit, and they won't build commits from people that aren't on the account, which is
So then you
nuts.
spin up your own. Well, I guess you're using them for a reason, right? But you just spin up a server that puts all your builds in. You make your own like
Yeah.
CI/CD, and then you should just be hosting
Yeah.
on your own anyways.
Right. Yeah. Which is always, yeah. So I've worked with so many people that are on Vercel and then have half of their own build process anyway to save, $200 a month or whatever. And that's what I mean by perverse incentives, right? Like,
Yeah, well, that's why I
it's
avoid a
just
lot of
bad for everybody.
services like that because those can be initiated at any time.
Right. Right.
Like you
Yeah.
can just change your
Exactly.
terms and be like, well, this is what we do
Yeah.
now. And you're like, well, I'm great. Now I got to
Yeah.
find other options or just deal with it.
Yeah. I totally agree. And that's part of the reason I want to do, why I think the providing a hosted option that's not a multi-tenant single instance, it doesn't break my incentive there, because I think like there's good open source SaaS companies like cal.com and stuff. But there's this weird incentive where like in the beginning of this project, I fought really hard to make it one Docker container that's easy to host, right? But then if I'm trying to make all my money from actually putting people on a single instance, that incentive to make things easy to host actually kind of gets flipped on its head, right? The harder I make it to host, the more likely they're going to get on my single instance.
Right.
Where if I'm just hosting it for you, I basically need something that can be spun up from a config file anytime someone makes a purchase. So yeah, a lot of what I think about is always trying to make sure that I'm doing things that will continue to make me money, but also align with the original vision of like empowering developers to make recurring income and be able to host this themselves and stuff.
Yeah, no, I think that's important. And I don't think people realize, at least I didn't realize it till I was in my late 30s. But just having any recurring income is huge because you're so used to making a decent salary as a software developer, like, and you grind hard through your 20s and early 30s, I think. But then at the end of the day, you're still just an employee that can lose his job. And then
Right.
if you're not aligning yourself to have some sort of monthly recurring revenue, you're always kind of trapped to have to work for somebody.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And and like retirement is very out of reach for most people, no matter how much they save, where we're really blessed in this industry. If you do figure out a way to make recurring income, that can sustain you through your retirement years. Like you can have a very
Exactly.
simple.
Which is like why I really I know like building websites isn't a really cool thing you're going to brag about. But then the more websites I build, the more I host. And that's something people aren't going to really leave because you can make your hosting competitive and affordable. And your churn rate's not going to be a big number. And churn is the hardest thing, especially with SaaS companies.
Right.
Fighting churn
totally.
is a new boss that you have to defeat. And that's not easy.
Yeah. Yeah. That's another thing I love about the pay once model. I'm like, people keep being like, you don't have recurring revenue. And I'm like, well, when they buy the software once, they've already paid for like what would have been a year of them being on my SaaS.
hmm
And like 30% of those people churn depending on your SaaS type. So,
Right. And yeah, they buy it. And if they don't use it, that's on them. But at least you kind
right.
of still got your year out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope that's not the case. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
it's not the end of the world for me if it is, where, yeah. And there's just like, with a SaaS, you sign up for it, you decide you don't want it, and they're like emailing you every 2 days for the rest of your life. You're like unsubscribing, you're still getting emails from them. They're like, please
Yeah. Isn't
come
that
back.
weird when that unsubscribe button doesn't work?
Yeah, yeah. That's something I really love. Like building email software. I'm like, I can make an unsubscribe button that works. And they have to write some, you know, weird custom code if they want to get around that. So I do like I think that there's a lot of room to be a force for good in that space, because it's a very gross space most of the time.
It can be a very gross space. And I feel like the broken unsubscribe, or you're just like doing an action that doesn't work and people
Yeah,
forget, right? Because you can
right,
unsubscribe. And then if they just delay emailing you a week, you
right,
probably forgot you unsubscribed. Like I don't remember
exactly. Yeah.
specifically, but it happens. And I feel like it's a very gross behavior that companies do because they don't want to remove
Yeah.
you from their mailing list.
Yeah. Yeah, and even like it's supposed to be one click, right? But most of these things you click on it and I learned this recently when building this. When you click an unsubscribe email link, yeah, it's supposed to send a post request and just be done. But it's very common to like bring you to a page, send a GET
Are
request,
you
have this
sure?
like questionnaire. Yeah. And then
Hey,
they're all
wait, we'll give you
defaulted to
half
like,
off. We'll give you half off for the
right, right.
next month, you know? And then
Yeah.
you like all the
Yeah.
buttons are confusing and the cancel one you can
Right.
barely see.
Yeah, exactly. So that's insane. And yeah, it's been nice to be making a tool that actually is like, I'm very user focused. I think part of that comes from being a front end developer for so long. I've always been like in this position where I'm advocating for that type of stuff. And then to be making my own software and not have some like dude in a suit telling me to do weird dark patterns has been awesome.
No, yeah, that is amazing. I love that. I'm definitely checking it out. I think I'll probably become a customer right after
Awesome.
this show.
Great news.
So I'll give it a test, and you can see how little my email list is, but maybe I'll get it up and
Well,
running.
I won't
But
even be able
like,
to see. That's the
oh
nice
right,
part. You're
because
gonna
I'm
own your data,
self-hosted.
right? Yeah.
But like for me, especially since I'm starting to do like SEO things, so I have to email reports and things. So I feel like
Mhm.
it would be quite beneficial.
Yeah, yeah, probably. And funny that you brought up that. I do want to be like, there's a couple features I want to add soon that'll help you automate sending report type stuff to lists. So, uh, yeah, I think it's. Sorry, my wife's distracted me.
No, you're good.
Oh, and my battery's about to die. I gotta. Luckily, I'm prepared. Yeah, sorry about that. Yeah, I hope you like it. There's still a lot of features that are coming soon, but the core of delivering like transactional emails and broadcasts to lists are there, and I already have a bunch of people sending way more emails than I send on it. So
That's awesome. I love that. I feel like you have a pretty good you have pretty good engagement, at least on X, than most people too. You seem to do a pretty
thanks.
good job of getting some attention your way, so that's good.
Yeah, that's funny because that's been so recent for me. I've been on X for years. Like I was pretty early on it, I think, and just no engagement the entire time I've ever been on there. And then recently, like, so essentially for me, contracting has dried up. There's like, it's so hard. I left the States around the same time that the economy took a nosedive. And
So like
those two things paired together.
COVID or a
a
little
little
after.
after.
Okay.
Yeah. And Yeah, so it got really hard for me to find contracts, and I used to get a fair amount from Twitter just from like being professional and networking on it.
Hmm.
And then one day I was just like, I'm gonna go crazy and just try and like involve myself in the drama and stuff to get more eyeballs because I knew I was going to be launching products. And it's funny, I've made a lot of people really mad. I think some people really hate it, but I've also found a lot of people that are very in love with the story arc of the
I
villain.
mean, I enjoy it. I'm a posting ghost. I interact a little bit. Maybe I have been told I should be more opinionated, but we'll see. Maybe I do. Maybe I do need some enemies out there, and then life will be a little more
Yeah,
fun.
yeah. I'm a huge MF Doom fan, if you know who that is.
Mm-mm.
He's like an indie rapper who like his story's long and complicated, so I'll try to like too long didn't read it. But basically, he like left the industry after the death of his brother and kind of just like disappeared for a while. And then when he came back, he adopted this new persona of like the supervillain of rap, and it, it's just very interesting. His whole take on that. Like, not only are his lyrics really provocative and like insulting to rappers in a way that is different from like regular rap beefs, uh, but he also like very systematically screwed every record label that ever tried to work with him. So he just like very much lived up to this villain persona in
Nice.
every facet. And
I'm gonna have to check him out. I like
yeah,
that.
for
That's
sure.
funny.
Highly recommend it.
Yeah, but like when you were saying contract work, like that's websites are the easiest thing for me to get, I think. But like I was,
Right.
I do custom everything, but like getting large projects in the last couple of years is incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
I
you're kind
totally
of
agree.
forced to build your own products, and that's kind of like that's why I built the hosting platform, and I've built other products. I think this is the most promising one so far, but you have to just keep trying to build your own products till something gets a little traction, and then
Yeah. I
keep building new products too.
yeah. I love that you built a host because that's so in line with the ethos I'm trying to like preach to developers now, because we have all the power to
Yeah.
give ourselves the stability that we need. And we just gave it away for nothing, you know?
Well, I was sitting here thinking, like, I was like, I don't want to spin up a droplet for every customer. It's a pain in the butt. I
Right.
mean, it's not horrible, but it's a pain. Or even a new
Mhm.
like Docker, what would you call,
Container or
not a container, but like, when you launch them all under one Docker file and they're all on the same like subnet
oh,
essentially.
yeah.
What is
Cluster?
that? Yeah, we'll call it a cluster. I was like,
Yeah.
even if I'm doing that for each like customer, it's such a pain in the butt. And then you want to use like the easy ways, like the platform as a service. So like, the easy ways to launch apps, or like using app on DigitalOcean, for instance. But
Mhm.
you end up paying $24 a month. So
Right.
you're paying, and then what to if you I don't feel like I want to mark that up onto my customers,
Right.
because then your hosting fees are just kind of ridiculous, and you're
Yeah.
just leveraging someone else's platform. And then I was like, I should just build my own. And I was like, I don't know if it's possible. So I just started like building things, and it's worked. Like I essentially have like a dynamic route that loads children live views inside of it, and like I
Oh,
don't know,
wild.
it's pretty cool. And I
I'd
wasn't
love
sure.
to
I was
talk
like,
about that.
yeah, anytime. I was like, I don't know how it's gonna scale or any of that, and I still don't have a ton of users on it. But like, I figure the worst case that happens is I just create another instance on a different
Yeah.
droplet and scale whatever I need to. If
Right.
and then like I do a lot of routing, like Nginx. I basically have like automated tasks. Like when I add a new organization, it creates the file structure and all like the default stuff that you need. And then it creates like an Nginx config file for routing. And then, I do the certbot thing, all of that through Docker.
Okay.
And And then plug, I use plug as like a router to the actual domain directory when it comes in.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah, I think it's funny too. You mentioned like you don't know how it'll scale. And I think I kind of talking about earlier when everyone's like they gotta be a unicorn. It's like you can probably scale that to a solid recurring revenue for your clients and have no issues. You don't need to be Facebook
Yeah.
levels of scale.
Well, and I mean, like,
Um,
let's just like do some math. Like, if you have 1,000 websites hosted, right? And you charge someone $20 a month for hosting, you're making 20 grand a month.
yeah. Yeah.
And
And those
you're
are
giving someone a very good service that they need, and you're not necessarily like
right.
feel icky about it. Like, you give them
Right.
a performant, awesome
Yeah.
website. Yeah.
Yeah. And at $20 a month, like good luck finding a host that is even going to charge that little. And then you've got some host, but it's some like now you have anything goes wrong with it, you have to go find a developer. Where like if they're just hosting with you, I assume you offer uh, what are they called? Retainer type deals and stuff like that, where
Yeah.
they can come to you.
Right now, like, we just do, like, we have like an offer, like, you get a templated custom like single page app, like up to 8 sections, and we just have like one cost. And then
Okay,
hosting, and they automatically get access to a plausible dashboard, so they have analytics out of the
it's
box
huge.
too. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
yeah, you can't do it for $20. So
yeah, you can't.
and yeah, it's a real disappointment that like more people aren't doing exactly what you're doing because everybody wins in that scenario
And
except the VC
I
overlords.
spent so many years wanting my unicorn idea, but
Right.
you can also just build stuff that's useful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's easier to do and to make money off of. And it's usually more sustainable in the long term, right? Because like you might have some unicorn idea and then 12 highly funded companies start competing with you. Or you can be like, man, I make websites. Why don't I just start hosting these and give them a
Yeah.
analytics
Well,
dashboard? And
and what's funny is it just came as like a tool to make my life easier. I was like, I don't want to
right,
spend so like I don't mind building websites for people, but I was spending too much time deploying websites.
right,
And
right.
now it's like it's so easy, and it's only going to get easier. Like, my processes are still very manual, and as I iron stuff out, it's only going to be more and more
Yeah,
automated, more admin dashboards built, and it's just going to get better.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's crazy you're doing websites with live view. I hadn't even ever considered that, but it seems like, especially since it sounds like you're running multiple websites in a single app, like that's
Well,
pretty
and I
cool.
also do, like, I mean, like, if you just have a homepage that doesn't, it's just going to be static HTML, just like how a Phoenix
Okay,
app works out of the box, where it
right.
routes to a static HTML page and then you can call live views. Same thing, essentially. That's what I
Okay,
basically just have a
cool.
bunch of live view apps inside of a live view app. Yeah.
Nice. Very cool. Yeah,
We have
I
Daniel. Do you know Daniel Berg?
that sounds familiar, but I'm
He's
not.
a JavaScript guy that came to the Elixir world and then went back to JavaScript. He said it's a shame Twitter is still banned in Brazil. At least I can follow you both
Oh,
here on YouTube.
oh yeah. Oh, I do. Yeah, of course I know who Daniel Berg is.
Yeah. No,
He's
it's a
awesome. I
bummer. I
talk
miss
all the
all
time
all
with
our
him.
friends from Brazil. I feel like they made up a large portion of the Elixir community on X.
I heard the ban is getting undone though.
Oh,
Didn't
good. I hope
Elon give
so,
in?
because that's
Yeah. So
ridiculous.
we'll see him again soon. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
awesome, and his YouTube channel is awesome.
Yeah, he's great. I
Yeah.
just had him on like a week or two ago. I don't remember.
Oh, really?
Everything just blends in. I don't.
I need to watch that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I found him when I started this whole Elixir journey, and yeah, great dude. He made I don't remember the video. It was something kind of attacking the JavaScript world, and I love to see that because as a JavaScript refugee, I think a lot more people need to talk about how insane it is. It's just, and like I know he switched back because there's money in it still, and that's how it's going to be for a while. But the more people that are open about how weird literally everything in it is, I think the more people will start to look into Laravel and Elixir and Rails. Like Laravel's kind of having its day in the sun recently, and I feel like that's coming a lot from JavaScript frustrated people.
Yeah. Well, like it's a hard position to be in because I went through this. I was context switching way too much. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to just be an Elixir backend engineer. That's all I want to be. And because context switching is difficult, I'm not saying you shouldn't. I think it's good that I know multiple technologies. But if you actually want to be really, really good in one technology, you kind of have to commit at least for 90% of your time.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe you have a different take on it, but I definitely get where Daniel came from, and he has to embrace where he's working because that's all his time. And if you start losing track of changes and new cool things, you don't really grow with the ecosystem.
Yeah. I mostly agree with your point on context switching, but I think it's like a unique phenomenon of the web, possibly because things change so much. And like you were saying, you have to be keeping up with like your ecosystem's direction. I've done a lot of hobby game development before, and it's so interesting just how different that is and how different the type of person a game developer is.
Well, most of them aren't very good developers, right?
You
They're
feel
more,
that?
they're more. I mean, I think like especially in the indie scene. Well, even some of the stuff you see AAA studios spitting out, sometimes it's just like, what? Like you launched a game that doesn't work.
Yeah, I think it's kind of interesting because I guess I agree. At first, I was like, I think they're amazing developers, but there's kind of like a level to it where like, if you're the type of person working on core engine features, you also could probably be working at like NASA. Like you're like weird levels of genius. But then a lot of the people that are doing the like scripting for a quest are probably a lot lower level than the people figuring out how to like
I think
do
like
physics emulation.
The biggest problem is just like the indie level, right? You have like very creative people that can design games, and then they also build them because you're bootstrapped. What else are you going to do?
Right.
So things just aren't built very efficient, right? And like I don't know that much. I started I actually have a book on my desk that I've started reading but have slowed down, but it's like all multi-game architecture.
Okay. Yeah.
And because my business partner is a huge gaming nerd is the best way to put it. So like we have some cool plans in the future where we're planning out a roguelike currently, and we're gonna build a game, so it'll be fun. And I'm nerdy about the back end performance. That's cool to me. I'm not a big gamer. I used to be a gamer like middle school through high school, and then I kind of like dwindled, but I'm trying to get back into it so I can at least know what I'm building, you know?
Yeah, I can relate to that. Like I definitely was a huge gamer, and now I just don't have the time, which sucks. It's not even like I definitely want to be playing games more. If I strike it big with this, that's what I'm going to be doing with most of my time. But it's just so hard. And especially the types of games I liked playing are so time consuming. It was like all RPGs or strategy games. And now I'm like, maybe I'll play chess for a half hour.
Yeah, that's how I was too. And then I feel like the switch was when everything went like super, multiplayer online. Like, cause I came from like the Counter-Strike days where you were playing on LANs, and as long as you're as good as your other buddies you're playing with, it's fun. And then if you can't commit, half your life to it, then you have little 12-year-olds online just like kicking your ass.
Right.
And then that's like,
and there's nothing worse than that.
Dude, I don't have time for this. It's not fun just to get your ass handed to you by a 12-year-old every time you try to play online.
Yeah, just like screaming into the microphone too. Yeah. Like,
Yeah, exactly. That's
yeah.
funny.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
what um, what kind of like QA process do you find yourself going in? Like, do you write tests? Are you a test-driven development guy? Do you not believe in
yeah.
full test coverage, or like how do you go about keeping your quality up?
That's a great question. So I started in QA. I mentioned that earlier. So tests have always been a big deal for me. And it's funny because I kind of really resented. I was essentially an SDET, software development engineer in testing, which meant like I wrote the code for tests.
Okay.
Um, and that was cool, and it got me like super obsessed with testing. And having started in the Ruby community, they're very TDD driven. And then you go into the React world, and like nobody, here's a secret for you, nobody writes tests for anything ever. It's
Hmm.
crazy. It's
I'm in the
really
middle.
weird.
I don't
Yeah.
like
Okay.
100% coverage, but I like coverage on like important things.
Interesting. Yeah. So I would say I'm kind of like that too. Now I've switched to TDD again. It's the first time I'm doing it in my career, just like since being in SDET, I guess. And I love it, but I don't test my front end. And that's kind of just from, like I said, I did React so long and was literally
Yeah.
encouraged to not write
I
tests.
I understand it, but I don't think your friend like if you have a good QA process, I feel like
Mhm.
UI, UX, like clicking a button, like making sure certain actions
Yeah.
happen. I feel like you should be catching that in a QA process anyways. That's a little more manual. So I feel like
Yeah.
yeah, I feel like back end stuff should be more heavily covered
Yeah.
by tests than front end.
Totally agree. And my backend is very well tested. It's probably, I don't know. I haven't checked coverage in a while, but you more or less know the state of of how tested your stuff is. And yeah, anytime I make a new feature, I do TDD and then just freeball it on the front end.
Nice. I need to
But
be I like test driven development. I enjoy it when I do it, but I always just end up hacking something out, writing tests for it, and
yeah,
then cleaning up my code. Like I don't know if that's a really backward process, but I always fall back into that.
yeah, I think it's so funny because a lot of people always make the argument that TDD is too slow. For me,
I think
especially,
it's more thought out because it forces you to think about what you're doing.
right. I, I totally agree. Like it makes you really plan ahead because you're like, here's what my code should look like when it's succeeding.
Hmm.
And but the thing for me is when you have the test, the feedback loop is so fast. Like if you have a runner rerunning every time you save a file, um, the feedback loop is like 2 seconds, which is
Yeah.
incredible. So I totally disagree that it's slower. I think I'm way faster when I do TDD. Sometimes I'll write a test and then I'll be like writing the code and then it's green and I'm like, I'm done. Like that was really quick.
Hmm.
And it kind of shocks me how fast I've made a couple features, and
I think the
it's so
feedback
funny.
is definitely very important. Now you're
Yeah,
inspiring me to change my ways again.
I think you should because yeah, there's so like I try to be really introspective. Like I try to really pay attention to what I'm doing and what causes me to do that stuff, especially in work. And when you don't have a test, like I wrote a line of code, save, get feedback, it's like, okay, I wrote the line of code. I'm going to open my browser and check it, or I'm going to check it one of the various ways. And then what's going on Twitter? What's going on here? And then, 10 minutes pass and you're like, okay, time to write my second line of code. Where, yeah, when you're just in
You're
this
giving
tight
away
feedback loop.
developers secrets of not working.
that's that's my whole Twitter strategy is blast all the secrets of the industry. So
Yeah, there you go. Like, wait, you're not working 10 hours a day. You're actually on Twitter for most of that. Like,
yeah,
shh, don't tell anyone.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, you want your developers off Twitter, you gotta switch to TDD. That's my big message of the day. Because and the other thing, not only is it a tight feedback loop, but we're so like lizard brained as people. Like I think our brains are so like wired for these simple reward systems,
Oh, for
and it's so
sure.
nice. It's so nice to like, type save red, type save red, type save green. Oh, like
Nice. What
neurons firing.
so what test libraries do you use? Do you use XUnit?
Whatever is whatever it ships with. I haven't even looked into
Okay, yeah,
that.
yeah.
The only
Okay.
thing I've changed about it is there's a library you can add so that you can watch, because it doesn't have a watch and rerun function, which I think is weird. But yeah, I think it's just XUnit.
Okay. Yeah, you've inspired me. I'm going to start doing test-driven development this afternoon.
Yeah, I think it's huge. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe there's a bunch of value in doing it on the front end. I've literally written 0 live view front end tests. And I've had some bugs that I caught recently that like tests would have caught. Like my pagination was broken for contacts because I didn't change the URL that it paginates through from the piece of code I copied.
So it wasn't
from.
even your context function. It was UI related. You weren't updating or you weren't reading the parameter, or you weren't updating it.
I was updating it, like it was /contacts/ pagination info. Yeah. And whenever you clicked on a page, it redirected to /lists because I copied the pagination from the lists part. And so that was one of those moments where I was like, damn, if I did a test for that, I definitely would have caught it. And
that is true.
And that's one of the things that's harder to test, right? Like pagination, you have to make a shit ton of
well, I think front end is way harder to test than back end stuff.
I totally agree. Yeah. Anyway, that was a long way for me to say I think you should do TDD and just focus on the back end and see how that works out.
Yeah, no, I think I will. I like that. Well, and I like having the watcher idea too, where you're getting your live feedback loop as you write.
Yeah, that's like necessary. I can't believe XUnit doesn't show
because the more I think about it is just like all my dynamic routing and stuff, I need to have solid tests written for that.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Yeah, I definitely, and part of the reason, and I'm learning a lot of these other email open source things, they don't have tests. And I'm like, I can't think of something I would want like I want my banked stuff tested, but I certainly, after that, the next thing is probably emails I'm sending to customers. Like I want to make sure those aren't messed up.
Did you hear?
That is super embarrassing.
Yeah, that is. And this might be a little side tangent, and I hope they don't do it anymore. But Uber went through a phase of not doing PRs because they didn't want to hurt developers' feelings. So they were just like,
that's crazy.
Just freaking merging features without code reviews, essentially.
That's nuts.
And
that's one of the weirdest things I've ever heard, especially if the reasoning was to protect people's feelings. Like,
I know, like
they're gonna feel really bad when they break prod.
I remember when I used to have feelings.
Yeah.
Like I remember taking PR comments so personally when I was new.
Right.
And it's just like, no, guys, it's just feedback. Don't have your feelings hurt. It's just like you could do something better, or maybe you need to think about something in a different way. But I used to like be so insulted by that and the QA process. If someone found a bug in a feature you just wrote, ooh, it dug in and it hurt my feelings.
Yeah. It's funny, starting on the other side of that, I feel like kind of prepared me for QA a little bit. Because like I'd find a bug and you message the developer and then they're like upset and you're like,
yeah, developers probably did not like you.
Yeah. No, yeah. Especially because I was really good at QA. And it's almost like the better at QA you are, the more developers hate you. And it's
dude, I'm really good at QA when like my team will definitely hates me when when a new feature comes out, and then I'll just be in a Discord channel, like screenshot report, like just a list of bugs, and that's how I'll start my day. I just,
Yeah.
early morning QA sessions are the best for me. So
Yeah, that's funny too, because I kind of agreed with that. Like when I was in QA, you really want to get in and like find some bugs early, because then you can kind of just ride off of chatting for the rest of the day. But
exactly.
but yeah, developers hate they sit down, and then 10 minutes later, I've got like 5 bugs from their feature yesterday, and it's just such a weird. It's weird that people's feelings are so tied up in it. And yeah, it's so weird that as someone in QA, you're kind of like hated the better you are at your job. And but yeah, so that's what I was saying. Like by the time I had become a developer, like I knew someone from QA is just going to send me a list, and they're not going to try and like couch it in all this flowery language, because
But don't you just
they're also
want
just
the bug and the report and a detailed,
right. You'd think.
yeah, like how do I find this bug? How do I do it? Boom.
Yeah. And there's certainly toxic people. Like I've worked some places where they send you a bug and they're like, it's not just a bug in a report. It's like, how did you miss this? Blah, blah, blah. Like, what were you thinking type of language? And
Oh
then
yeah,
that's
that's
like,
always the worst.
yeah, yeah. Then
Well,
you're
like
like,
the
come do my
worst
job,
person,
man.
the worst person to do QA is the person that wrote the code, right? Because they'll
Right,
only test it the way they wrote the code in their head for.
right,
So they're not going to
right.
find any bugs, and that's how they missed it because they only wrote it
Yeah,
one way,
yeah,
So it's easy to
yeah,
overlook.
totally. And
But yeah, I remember taking things so personally. So if you guys are juniors and you take things personally, the sooner you get over that, the better it gets.
for sure, yeah. Especially like something else I didn't realize when I was a junior, even with the QA experience, is like senior developers do not want to spend a ton of time reviewing PRs, because they have their own tasks a lot.
Hmm.
And so, yeah, they're going to be very factual. They're just going to be like, this is wrong.
Hmm.
And maybe an explanation why, or maybe not even. Maybe this is wrong, linked to docs. And that'll sometimes hurt because you read it as like, you're so dumb, linked to docs. But that's
At
not what it
least you
is.
got a
It's
link
just
to the
like,
docs. That's like a really, that's nice.
yeah,
You should be,
sometimes I talk to people and I'm like, I've been lucky in my career. I feel like some people have worked places that are uh, just very lazy in their reviews and stuff.
I was always just like thrown into the fire um, with every job, and I had to take the responsibility. So I feel like that also makes you good because you don't
Yeah,
like when you're new and imposter syndrome really hits you hard, all you're doing is overcompensating with like
right,
working longer hours and learning as much as
right.
you can in like the time you're awake. So yeah, I was probably harder on myself than anyone else.
Yeah, that's funny. I had such an inverted career where, like, very early on, I had so much freedom and a ton of responsibility, and then as I got better at like, basically, I got really good at making like data visualizations, and that caused me to get hired as like a data viz guy, and that's like a very specific thing. So
Mm-hmm.
it was weird that, like, yeah, early on my career when I definitely shouldn't have been doing it, I was like leading teams, and then later in my career, it was like just handle all the data viz stuff, and
Yeah.
basically that happened until I went freelance. So yeah, it's funny how sometimes you start out and you're just thrown to the wolves, and
Yeah.
then as you get better and could have actually handled that, now you're in some
You're
specialist
like, no,
task.
I'll dial back and stay in my lane. Like, don't let
Yeah,
me bother you guys. But
yeah,
yeah, that's definitely. I feel like it was like I'm appreciative for being like thrown into the deep end right away,
mhm,
just because like it forced me to learn so much. Like I'm a fast learner
yeah.
for the most part, but it like made me, drink from a fire hose.
Are you self-taught?
I'm self-taught in software, yeah, but like I came like so education, I have an engineering background. I went to
Oh,
school for
okay.
structural engineering, and then ended up doing mechanical and electrical engineering and
Okay.
manufacturing for 10 years. And then I was like,
Oh, wow.
I'm sick of working in manufacturing, and I taught
Did you
myself how to
do,
code.
what are they called? They're like, did you do like PLC programming for like,
Yeah, so like I did a lot
okay.
of PLC stuff, and that's kind of what got me like to taste programming. But like
Yeah.
PLC is so nice because
All
you're like
logic stuff. Yeah.
just dragging switches and timers around, right? And it just converts to
Right.
very basic. What is ladder logic? What is
Yeah.
ladder like? Just whatever, the most basic thing you can do.
Right.
And so yeah, I did a lot of PLCs and like servo controllers, and so
Yeah.
like lots of sensors and timing. And it was cool. Like I did a lot of automation work. I just Working in a factory is hard work.
For
And
sure.
I was like,
Yeah.
you know what?
So,
I wanted more flexibility. I wanted to be able to be remote, and like it wasn't that I wanted to work less. I just wanted to work from wherever I was.
yeah. Yeah, totally. Uh, that's funny. So I have a half sister and her dad, different dad. Uh, he does that for a living. So,
Okay.
he is who gave me my very first job while I was like in high school. So I was in factories as like a 16, 17, 18-year-old kid, and he was doing all the like PLC Allen Bradley stuff,
Yeah.
and I just had to carry pipes around and bend them and run
Yeah.
wires
Nice.
and stuff. Uh, so yeah, very familiar with how much working in a factory sucks.
Yeah. Even
Especially
though you're
like,
doing the coolest stuff in the factory, it's still a lot of work.
yeah, yeah, yeah. It's crazy. And it's funny too. I know some people that work like residential construction and electrical work, and they try to like empathize, and it's like, no, it's really shitty to carry like 500 pounds of pipe, and that's like all you're doing for a day is like walking back and forth from a truck with like mounds of steel
My
rods on you.
well, like for like the majority of my career, it was a family business, and it was blown film extrusion,
Okay.
so like plastic bags and things. And so
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
you have these tubes that go up like 3 stories, right?
Right.
And
Yeah.
I basically pulled out a lot of like mechanical systems, so hydraulics, and everything was timed with cams and stuff. Honestly, I
Mhm.
think mechanical timing is so much more impressive than
Yeah.
like PLC timing, because it's just, a circuit, or, a timer at that point. But
Right.
the worst part was I used to have to lug, you know, 70-pound motors up a 3-story
Yeah.
ladder on my
Yeah.
shoulder. And then like that's the day, right? Like, oh, I have to put a new
Yeah.
vector drive in up there. And
Right.
yeah, I get to carry it up there.
That's so funny that you did that. Like I've never talked to anyone about this in the industry. But yeah, same stuff. Like so we did a lot of work at Kroger and worked on their blow molds for like milk cartons a lot.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Yeah,
uh
I did. Like, I'm familiar with like some injection molding,
yeah,
what a rotary molding, and then blown film was where I knew
that's
most of
so
my
funny.
expertise. But yeah, funny. Yeah, dude. That feels like a lifetime ago. I did that for
Yeah.
about 10 years.
That's a long time too.
No. And
That's
now
wild.
I'm
So what
round
got you?
what got me to software?
Yeah.
Wildness. um
Just that desire to like work remotely.
Yeah, I think it's because I felt so stuck working at a factory. Like, I was in
Yeah.
Wisconsin, and I just like
Okay.
had like the only work I could do was going into the office, right? I always had to be there.
Yeah.
And then I was
Yeah.
like, I'm smart enough to be remote. So I
Mhm.
taught myself how to program, and I got my first job in like 6 months.
Oh, that's crazy. It took me so
Yeah.
much longer. But you have an engineering background. That's a huge difference.
Well, I was extremely motivated too. And like, I'm not saying I
Oh, I
deserved
was
my
too.
job.
I'm just
I kind of lucked out. Maybe it was 8 months, but it was pretty quick. And I was only making like $1,000 a month with my first job, but
oh wow. Okay.
I made it like
very
it
foot in your door
escalated
type
quickly.
of
Like,
position.
yeah, I got it quick. But yeah, it was wild. And I didn't start in software until I was 30.
Oh wow,
Yeah.
that's
So now
crazy.
I'm rounding 10 years in software soon.
Oh, cool. So we
Yeah.
started around the same time. That's funny.
So,
A little younger
yeah.
than you though. I think that's funny because I think you look younger than me.
I'll accept that. No, yeah,
It's
I just
the
turned
magic of hair,
39.
man.
Hey, that is one thing I have. I have hair.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Mine started falling out so young. Uh, I probably should have started shaving my head at like 24, and I waited
And
till
did
like
you
26.
hang on to it too long?
A little
Did you?
bit, not nearly as long as some guys. Basically, one day I had noticed it was thinning, and that was like 24 or something. And
Yeah.
then yeah, by the time I was 26, like I was in front of the mirror and I kept trying to just position it so that you couldn't see my scalp, and I
Yeah.
couldn't find a way, and I was like, it's done. Like,
That's good. I always tell people
because I
just
think
embrace the baldness. It's way better than
yeah,
having a comb over.
yeah, I think yeah, exactly. Once you have difficulty, like because yeah, for a couple of years I had like a style I could do, and I just
Yeah.
looked fine. I didn't look balding at all. But once you're really fighting that, and you've got to like every hair needs to be in a very specific spot,
Yeah.
you look so much goofier than you do
Dude, I
when you're
had a
just
buddy
bald.
that was like bald before we finished senior year in high school. It was crazy.
That's crazy. That's
Yeah.
funny. Yeah,
Just
yeah.
embrace
And some people
baldness. If
hold
I
on.
was if I was going bald, I would just it would be off.
Yeah, I think it's so funny. Yeah, like people have opinions, but I think being totally bald does not look nearly as bad as balding and hanging
That's
on to it.
true. Well, like if you're
Yeah,
trying to hang on to it, you probably look 10 years older than you are too. When you could
right,
just
right. Yeah,
zip it off
yeah,
and you'll probably look younger immediately.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. I felt so happy when I like because I shaved my head in high school and stuff. I was a wrestler, and sometimes the headgear is so weird that it'll like
Mm.
make your hair look crazy. So I had shaved my head young a couple times, so I knew I didn't have like a weird shaped dome. That's the worst. Like you shave your head for the first time and you've got some
And you
like
got a
crazy
weird
egg
shape
shape.
head. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But so yeah, I think that's most people's fear. But yeah. I should
Just
get
gotta be.
buff though, because bald and buff is that's a look.
Yeah, there you go. You gotta, add some lifting to your running regiment.
Yeah. I'm hardly even running. I need to do more of that first, but it's crazy. Before COVID, I got into such good shape, and I was running like 6 miles a day, and then the whole world shut down, and I stopped doing it, and I've never gotten anywhere close to being able to do that again.
It's hard to get back into if you let it lapse, that's for sure.
Yeah,
I lucked out. I was living in Idaho during like all the COVID lockdowns, so really not much changed because it was just a small town. But like the
yeah.
ski resorts closed, and that's when I
Okay.
learned I started backcountry skiing. So I would just
Oh,
skin up the
cool.
mountains and then ski, and that was a lot of fun. So I didn't let it stop me.
Yeah, that's nice. I was in Phoenix, Arizona, and yeah, it was like everything shut down, and my wife has a autoimmune disease, so we took it like crazy seriously,
Oh,
and
I'm
I
sure. Well,
basically
no
like
one knew. Like the first
yeah,
like 3 to 4 months, no one knew it was happening.
yeah. Well, even yeah, we took it serious for like way longer than that. Because yeah, I just didn't want to like some young healthy people were getting COVID and really like screwing them up. So I
Yeah,
was not going to risk it with my wife. So yeah,
I
that
was
was
the
nuts.
opposite. I was like, if I die, I die.
Yeah, if I was single, I would have took that
Yeah,
attitude too. Like, uh, I'm very typically like I'm not gonna let things get in the way of my life. But
yeah. That's me. I'm very stubborn. Like I kind of like making
yeah,
my own calls. So, what
yeah,
ended up taking you to Spain?
dude, that's a crazy story. I don't know how much of it you want to know, but
How it
so
just depends what you want to share live on Honest.
Oh, I'm
Man.
fine. I've shared it a few places. It's just such a weird, like the events are crazy. So because my wife has a chronic illness, we've always had a real issue with the American healthcare system. Not just how much money you have to spend all the time, but my dog's going nuts. Hey, uh, you spend a ton of money, but also I was talking about perverse incentives earlier. They're incentivized to drag out care and run you through a million machines that are like irradiating you and
Yep.
doing a bunch of stuff that often isn't necessary because it's profitable. And so we've wanted to leave forever.
I'm right there
But
with
it's
you.
really hard to
Our
move.
between that and
Yeah.
like the quality of our food
Yeah.
and the
Oh, dude,
knowledge
I
you
didn't
need to
even
know if
know
you're
because
eating
I'd never
healthy,
been to
like,
Europe.
yeah.
Yeah. It's gross. It's so weird how much better just stuff like pasta is here.
Hmm.
Like anytime I ate pasta in the States, which should be like a food that is pretty fine to eat, it's not like a
You would think
crazy,
so.
uh, yeah, but you eat it, I would eat it and I would just like have weird chest, like tightness, hard of breathing, and I'd feel slow and sluggish. And then here you eat pasta and it doesn't do that to you. And you're like, what the hell is going on?
Yeah, our fortified pasta, whatever they're spraying all over our
Yeah.
wheat here, like
Right. Right.
it's ridiculous how hard it is to find stuff without chemicals that destroy your immune
Yeah.
system and whatever else it is. It's yeah. I'm right there with
Yeah.
you.
Sorry. Can you hear my dog? He's making a ton of noise.
Yeah, it's not
Okay.
horrible, but I can tell he's
It's all
having
right.
fun with a plastic bone or something.
Yeah. He's got like deer antlers we get him.
Oh,
He's a
nice.
nut.
Usually Jax will decide to like drink water or make some sort of noise when I'm live, so I'm used to it.
Yeah. Dog life, right?
Yep.
I'm just happy they're not barking. But yeah, so we wanted to leave forever, and it just was not working out. Because leaving the country is really hard, and so we just kept putting it off and putting it off. And then one day, my apartment flooded with sewage backup.
Oh, dang.
And it was nuts. It was absolutely disgusting. So one of the things that happened, we didn't know this, but we had a giant hole behind the mirror in our bathroom where they had like worked on pipes or something and then never patched it up, which
They
is
just hung
nuts.
the
And it
mirror
went
over
through
it.
both. Yeah. And it was a hole that went through both sides. So my neighbor had a hole too. When they took the mirror off, we could see they took the mirror off of both sides and we could just see our neighbor's apartment into their bathroom. And the complex was like slumlord levels of terrible about this.
Sounds like it.
They refused to clean the sewage. They refused to fix the hole. It caused the hole to open up over our shower that they refused to fix. It
Gross.
flooded into our bathroom, but also into our kitchen. They didn't clean any of that. So I had to enter. So we like just fled the apartment. We like left. My wife was actually, because of her illness, she was being fed via TPN, like a bag of food. So she needed like a pretty sterile environment at the time.
So sewage pouring through your ceiling isn't good.
Yeah, right. And so we just left and we went to my sister's house, and they were like the landlord was psychotic about it and refused to do anything. They sent the regular cleaning lady to our place with just a mop. And I'm like, no, this is sewage. Because of my work that we were talking about earlier, one of the places we did electrical work at was a sewage treatment plant. And I'm familiar with like the dangers of black water, they call it. And
Yeah.
I was like, no, you need to have ServPro come. They need to like professionally clean this. It's disgusting. And they just refused. And then, so our cleaning lady only spoke Spanish, and I put on the door translated, because like she came and I showed her photos and I was like, this is sewage. Like your mop's not going to help. And she left. And then I put that on the door and it just said, if you've been sent to clean, because we weren't living there anymore. So I wanted something on the door. And it says, if you've been sent to clean, know that you're going to be touching raw sewage. Anyway, the landlord is like, you keep denying our cleaner, which I'm not. I'm just informing her. She could have come in. I don't care. She didn't want to touch raw sewage. They're like, you keep denying her, so we actually have no obligation to clean it all now. You should do it yourself. And we're not fixing the holes, and we're not doing this. So then I was like, okay, cool. So I'm moving out. You've broken your terms of the lease. And they were like, no, we haven't. You have to pay like $6,000 to move out early. And I had to fight a whole legal process. Like, I had to get in case this ever happens to anyone, you should look locally. You might have what's called a renters union that you can join. And that's what I did. And we paid him like $2,000 instead to help us legally break the lease. And at that point, we were just like, time to leave the country, I guess. Like, we have to start our whole life over. Another weird thing that happened right at that moment, that's when Roe v. Wade was overturned. And I lived in Arizona, which is one of the few states that already had a law in place where if Roe v. Wade got overturned, it immediately took effect. And my wife, because of her condition, if she were to get pregnant, it would be a risk to her life. So we were like, we have to leave the state anyway. It was just crazy. So yeah, we were like, time to pull the trigger and move out of the country.
Wild. Life can be crazy. Yeah, because I went from Wisconsin to California to Idaho to Utah, and I would have never made any of those guesses. So I get it.
You're in Utah now?
Yeah.
How do you like it?
Oh, I love Utah. It's amazing. I never even really knew what Utah was until I moved here, really. And then,
awesome.
Yeah. I mean, like between this and Idaho and like Wyoming, like along, like the Teton Range or any of these mountains, it's amazing. I don't think I want to live anywhere else. Yeah.
Yeah, it's crazy. I think a lot of people aren't aware of how beautiful that area is, especially if you're from another country. Like, America has some landscapes that are just like to die for.
Yeah. Well, what's wild is like Utah has them all, right? We have our slot canyons to like, pine tree covered mountains. We have everything. And then like the arches and like Bryce Canyon, like so many cool things.
Yeah. Arizona's kind of like that too. And a lot of people don't expect that. But we've got Sedona.
Yeah, fun fact is there's only like 5 spots in the world that have slot canyons. And
what is a slot canyon?
A slot canyon is
like when the air carved out a
I think
thing?
I wonder what the actual definition is. But basically, like it's from water runoff, I think.
Okay.
It might also be from wind. But yeah, it's only Utah, Arizona, and then like Afghanistan, a place in Australia. There's only like 5 spots in the world. And now I'm like kind of curious. Let's look up the definition of a slot canyon. I'll ask ChatGPT. Like I started doing a lot of rappelling and rock climbing since I moved here, and it's been a lot of fun. Okay, yeah, it's a slot canyon is a narrow, deep canyon formed by erosion of rock, typically sandstone or limestone, through water and wind over a long period of time. So it's the narrow, tall wallness.
Yeah. Okay.
And yeah, we've got a lot of those dangerous. It's very dangerous for like monsoon season and stuff because people will get caught in them and they fill up very quickly. That's nice. I guess like we've been going for a while. We can kind of wrap up. Let's see. I have a question that I wanted to ask. Oh yeah. All right. So you come from, I think, a very interesting background, QA to developer to like kind of an entrepreneur now, where you have your own product. What kind of advice do you have or lessons that you've learned through building products like 00 that you could share with other developers that maybe want to start building their own product and think about some sort of like recurring revenue that isn't just hour traded for dollars kind of thing?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Something we've touched on a couple times is just don't freely sign over your clients to these services for the name of like convenience now. Take a little bit of time, do a little bit of work, and provide a better service like you're doing through your hosting. I think that's huge, and you'll thank yourself in the future. And that's something literally every developer can do, right? You don't need a great idea. You already know what your customers need, and you could do it. And I think that's huge. But to be more like product oriented with my advice, something I think I've learned through this is you really need to validate early and be completely unattached to your ideas. I was building that form idea for a long time, and I would talk about it and nobody got excited. And I was like, oh, that's because I have no followers or I have no audience. That's why nobody's excited. And I just kept chugging along on this form idea. And then in building it, I made, we didn't talk about this at all. We maybe should have. But so the first version of 00 is only going to be an open source library for like very minimal email sending, basically just covering my use case of like, I got a form submitted, now send an email.
Mm-hmm.
And I published the code and it had no docs, and I tweeted about it and I was like, hey, does anyone want this? And if people go star the repo, I'll write docs for it, is what I said. And it got like 80 stars, and the tweet blew up and had like hundreds of likes, and people
That's
were
awesome.
like, oh, are you gonna, yeah, huge. And I think that is like, you need to throw ideas out there until one is validated and then chase that. Don't keep thinking something's going to work and like pushing for it. Even if you think it's a great idea, like I do think there's a space for that form thing I was making that combines something that's useful for developers and a marketing team and is cheap. I think that's a solid idea. Mm-hmm. But for whatever reason, the way I was talking about it and pitching it wasn't getting people excited. And so I need to move on, like, yeah. I'm not the person to sell that idea, it seems.
I think it's really important. I've been part of a few startups that kind of, if you're not solving a problem, it's really hard to sell your product. Right. And I think a lot of problems, like a lot of startups create a problem that doesn't exist. At least like the founder or whoever has the idea, and they convince themselves it's a real problem when it's not. And I've seen that over and over, right? And they're excited about their idea, and it is cool. But if you're not solving a problem, like for instance, I don't know, let's pretend I created a better way to text people, right? Mm-hmm. I better make a really cool platform that's cooler than just iMessage or WhatsApp, or no one's going to be interested in my product.
Right. And yeah, you're that type of an idea, you're setting yourself up to kind of fail, because you have to hit this level of quality and you're competing against established players. And it's like, it's not going to happen. Especially if you're indie, like maybe if you get VC funding, but if you're trying to be independent, like don't chase an idea that needs like perfect execution. And I think that's why the email thing has worked out so well for me. It's like people just want to be free from these platforms. And
I mean,
my idea didn't.
I'm your market 100%, because I hate feeling tied into things like that.
Yeah, same. And I think that sentiment is growing. And I think something that this is another piece of advice, I guess, something that clicked with me when I realized I was going to sell this once and basically do the whole product the way I was doing is like my ideals and my product lined up in a way that marketing became very easy for me, because I could be very provocative and poke at Resend and poke at these other giants and make fun of them for the things I think they're doing wrong, and all of that fall within product marketing. And it just became very natural. Like I want to market my product because I want to be like an agitator in this space.
Advice to developers that don't know how to sell their own product.
Yeah. Like and it's hard. It's so hard to sell stuff, but
Hmm.
it becomes so much easier when what you're selling aligns with what you believe, uh, because then talking about it becomes super natural.
Do you do everything just over Twitter right now, or do you have other avenues?
It's basically just Twitter. I'm trying to write some articles so that I can get SEO. I think long-term SEO is the play.
For sure. And having a blog
But
is probably the best way to do it.
right. Yeah. But yeah, it's mostly just Twitter. I needed money fast, if I'm like totally transparent. That's why I did a pre-sale too. I was like running out of money.
Hmm.
So I started being insane on Twitter for the attention and then just pushing the product. And
So I just have to be
it's
insane
interesting.
on Twitter and get more attention.
I think it helps, for sure. You gotta like, again, it's one of the like alignment things. Cause I think there's a lot of people that are just like assholes on Twitter. And it's like, no, you have to like I and this is a little pretentious, but I very much see myself as like a Robin Hood type character because I'm being mean to these like VC funded giants that I think are
You're being
taking
a
advantage of
tasteful
people.
asshole. You're not like just an
Yeah,
asshole to be an asshole.
right. Yeah, where like some people I won't name, you watch how they interact on Twitter and like someone small is like, I politely disagree with you. And they're like, you have 3 followers, shut the hell up. Like,
Oh
and you're
yeah,
like,
that's
why are you
weird.
punching down at this
Yeah.
weirdo? Yeah, like,
Well, and why do followers mean any like that doesn't mean anything.
right, right.
Like
Yeah,
so
yeah,
you might write interesting stuff and someone just likes to consume versus speak their
right.
opinion all the time. That's the only
Yeah,
difference, right?
yeah. Or they just like are hardly on Twitter and work a lot, aren't
Right.
focused on growing their audience. And yeah, so yeah, there's definitely two ways to like be noisy for attention, and I think you need to, if you go that route, you need to be careful to like not get lost in the sauce and start like yelling at people that don't deserve it. Um,
Yeah. I feel like I used to be that, like when I was in my 20s, I would love arguments, like Facebook
yeah,
arguments.
same man.
And then like
Yeah,
I never really got into the Twitter ecosystem, but it's very similar, right?
right,
And
right.
I love Twitter now, but I also I don't get involved in too long of threads because one, my attention
Yeah,
span, like I just can't keep up and I don't care enough. But yeah, I used to just love to say outrageous crap just to like make people
yeah,
lose it. Like I don't even have to
yeah.
believe what I was saying. I would just say it to
Right.
make
Yeah.
them like
Same.
blow up. And
Same for
now
sure.
I approach things and like, I could just be nice. And
Yeah.
that's my new motto. Like if I can't be nice, usually I'll just like avoid replying until I
Yeah.
can come back with a cool head and be like, I get your
I think
opinion.
that's I think that's the healthiest way to be for sure. Like I think Aaron Francis is a great model of that. If you know who he is, he's a guy in the Laravel space, and he's like the
Okay.
nicest dude in the world.
Nice.
Just an incredible guy, man of great character, and it's probably great for his mental well-being and stuff. And he was able to build an audience that way too. But I think that's rare. I think it's much easier to build an audience the way I'm doing it, but it's also probably much worse for my mental health. So,
There's just a balance. Just make sure you take some time off when you need it.
yeah, for sure. Uh, but yeah,
Awesome. Well, this was a lot of
thanks for
fun.
having me, man.
Yeah, it was
Yeah,
great chatting. Uh, 00 sounds awesome. Uh, in the comments, at least on YouTube, Twitch makes me update it later. But in the description below, you can find all Levi's info. Definitely follow him on Twitter for some entertainment and product updates. I enjoy your content, so I always like it.
thank you. I
But
feel like if people find me from videos and then they go to my Twitter, they're gonna be like, "There's no way this is the same guy," but it is.
hey, being a keyboard warrior is sometimes easier than being mean in a conversation, right?
Yeah. Well, I don't.
And
Yeah, yeah,
I
and I
mean
don't
that in a
really like.
nice way, not a degrading way. I guess it kind of
Yeah,
could, yeah. Well,
yeah.
I
No.
also think when conversations or anything over text is a lot harder to put
Is
tone behind as well. Like,
Right.
because I'm a very
Right.
sarcastic person. You can't put sarcasm through something texted.
Same. Yeah. And that's why I'm trying to make more videos on Twitter. I don't know if you've seen that, but there was this like, sorry, we just said bye and now I'm going
I
to
know.
jump into something
It
else,
always
but
happens this way. It's fine. Just like
that's funny.
what do they call it? The Irish, the opposite of an Irish goodbye.
You might actually be thinking of the Spanish goodbye. That's what they call it here. They hang out in front of bars for like ever talking to each other.
That's funny. Because the Irish goodbye is you just ghost and dip.
Yeah.
And then, yeah.
Opposite of that. Yeah. But so I was going to say, I've been trying to make videos, and Guillermo from Vercel was talking about how everyone should get back in the office. And I've been doing those running videos, and it was pouring rain that day. And I made like a running video where I was like, Guillermo, I'll be there. Don't think I'm not founder mode. Like, I'm coming in. And that over text, I would have sounded so angry and weird. But in the video, like, I'm laughing and I'm doing a David Goggins impression, and it just comes across a lot better, I think, when people can see your face and know that you're not just like a bitter, angry guy. You're like messing up. You're sarcastic. You're joking.
Exactly. Yeah, I prefer video. I think video is the way to go. But all right, guys.
Sure. I'm just so uncomfortable with it. But.
Yeah, you get over it. I used to like hate hearing my own voice, and then you edit enough videos, and then you sound the same to yourself and on video.
Nice.
It all changes. But yeah, awesome. Everyone that tuned in, thank you so much. I hope you guys have a great weekend. And I'm going to be doing some live coding in like an hour and a half. So join me back here. But all right, thanks so much, Levi. Testing.